As a startup, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so at all times we were focused on how do we grow, and the philosophy is never stop selling, never stop recruiting. And if you just focus on those two things, you can scale to seven figures, multi seven figures in as little as a year or fast. If you want to attract the cats, you have to have the milk. And so I have made more networking connections strides ever in the last 5 months of making YouTube videos than I have in the last previous 4 years. What if I could get to 100K a month? That's like, nobody does that. That's crazy. Then I get to 100K a month. I remember seeing 100K a month on the Stripe that day, and I was just like, I think I like cried or something. And it wasn't like tears of joy. It was like, man, I worked this hard for this. Like, really, it was all for this. Like, I'm not fulfilled with this. I'm not satisfied with this. What am I doing? Like, why do I keep chasing these arbitrary metrics?
So, as I mentioned, I'm very, very impressed by your story, far beyond the numbers, which are already fucking amazing as it is. I love your character. I love the kind of charisma that you have. I love the feeling that you bring into a lot of your work, and it's going to be hugely valuable for today. But I wanted to ask, how does someone go from zero to over 300,000 a month in revenue?
Great question. That question is so much better with that Irish accent too, man. Um, so how do you go from zero to $300,000 a month? So I think the underlying philosophy to that level of scale is this one idea, which is never stop selling, never stop recruiting. All we did, we went from basically zero to 300K a month in 13 months, so about a year. All we did was focused on selling, 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 and recruiting, 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 because you run into operational bottlenecks or you run into people bottlenecks, right? Like either your systems can't support your scale or you don't have the people in combination with the systems to support the scale. So all we did was we reinvested everything into paid ads, into marketing, and into recruiters. So we're just constantly flooding our calendars with appointments for potential prospects. We're just constantly putting that pressure on the back end to support the influx of new business. And then we're recruiting CSMs, we're recruiting salespeople, we're just recruiting people to fill in all of these gaps. That way we don't get overwhelmed. And we still did get overwhelmed, but I think what happens is a lot of people they find product market fit, or at least they figure out a way to acquire customers, but then they say, "All right, I know how to get customers. Let me put that on pause now and figure out how to serve
Mm.
them." And that's where they always go stagnant and they get to 10K, 20K, and then they just stop. They just stop because they can't support the scale because it's too much for them. And a lot of it's mental. A lot of it's like, let me sit back now and figure out how I can actually deliver for these people I've sold. Well, why can't you do that while you continue to sell more people too? Why can't you
Mm.
do both at the same time? And that's, as a startup, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so at all times we were focused on how do we grow, and the philosophy is never stop selling, never stop recruiting. And if you just focus on those two things, you can scale to seven figures, multi seven figures in as little as a year or faster.
Man, you're fucking lighting the fire under my ass straight away with this stuff, because this is the exact stuff that's even top of my mind 24/7 now. Is like, how do we keep things always moving forward, but maintain quality, maintain service, improve fulfillment, and not have people churning out. So how
Yeah,
do you find that delicate kind of dance and balance?
great question. So, as founders, we need to be able to focus our time and energy on the most important things. And the only way we can do that is by hiring a team. So when I say never stop recruiting, that is so key, because if you're getting bogged down in media buying, fixing broken systems, doing all of that shit, you can't focus on serving your customers. Even if you're not bringing on new business, even if you're paused at like 10 clients, you can't go and support your clients actually getting results because you're bogged down in other shit, right? So like we had to hire immediately. We hired team members, and I think I've mentioned this to Ibrahim. My partner and I's biggest flex is that we've never sold a single client ourselves. We've never managed a single client ourselves. We've never ran ads for a single client ourselves. Since day one of the agency, other people were selling, other people were doing the media buying, and other people were managing the client relationship. So how do you balance that, or how do you manage that balance of, well, service and sales, serving and scaling at the same time? It's by getting other people, great team members ideally, to manage all of the day-to-day kind of just nominal aspects of the business that take up your energy and take up your mental space, so you can focus on what levers do we need to pull, right? And
Mm.
this is why I loved having a partner. My partner would focus on sales and marketing and acquisition. I didn't have to think about that. I didn't have to worry about that. I had to focus on, let's make sure this doesn't break on the back end. So in that sense, it's almost like we have two different companies, and he's running one and I'm running the other, and we just work together to make sure that both companies can succeed at the same time. So I do think partners are valuable in that sense. um, but good enough team members can solve the problem that a partner solves. So if you just find good enough team members that can be your sales manager, give them profit share, like attract those great people to manage a complex problem for you so you can go manage the other complex problem. AKA they do sales, you have a sales manager, that way you go focus on back end fulfillment, client service, because to do both at the same time is admittedly very hard. It's hard to
Of
do both
course.
at the same time.
And
So
I think the challenge with a lot of agency owners as well is the fact that they're so involved in the business. Me
yeah,
being one of them, like me being literally like I'm prime example of this, that it's difficult to be able to step out of that and navigate it from it. And the way you speak, I love, because I know Hormozy was a big influence on you, and
yeah,
even the way you kind of break down his thought process is his principles, and he has gone and done it, got the reward. You have actually gone and done it and got the reward. And the sales example was perfect, because that's actually what he breaks down several times. Is he can do the sales, he can hire a recruiter, and he can hire the best recruiter in fucking town who can get
yeah,
the best salespeople, and therefore they're selling like crazy. But
exactly.
how did you get to that stage with hiring? Because you're a young dude. How the
Yeah.
fuck did you go about hiring?
Yeah, dude, that is a great question. That was the hardest part for me, was going from an executor to an executive, and going from master of all things to now a manager of all people. That was such a difficult shift because I was 20 years old, I think, when Estate AI started, and I'm
What?
like,
What did you know?
yeah,
What did you know?
I'm 22.
Fuck, man.
Yeah.
What the
Um,
fuck?
I look a little bit older because my hairline's shit and my beard's messy, but
Man,
no,
don't
I'm
worry.
kidding.
You
Like,
got the money now. You can buy that. You can buy the transplant, man. It's chill. Don't worry.
nah, man. If God made me this way, then it's all for a reason. But yeah. So, for me, funny enough, I had just like the best mentor in the world, who used to be a Fortune 100 senior VP of HR and knew all things recruiting, hiring, firing, management, like just knew everything. And that person was my dad. My dad was a VP of HR and all this stuff at a really big company here in the States. Actually, they're big in like Sweden and in Europe as well. I can't say what the company is, but he, like, I always thought he had the most boring job in the world, because like all I knew was HR, and I don't know if you've ever watched The Office, the show,
Yeah.
but like all I had in my mind was like Toby from The Office, which everybody hated. Like he was the HR guy. Everybody just was like, "Fuck you, Toby!" Like he was just getting like destroyed every episode, and so I was like, "Damn, that must be my dad." Like, like my dad's job sucks. I never talked to him about it, and then one day I had to hire somebody. And I'm on the phone with my dad and he's like, "Yeah, how's the business going?" I'm like, it's tough. I hired this person, but I don't know if I should have actually hired them or not. But I don't know. I'll figure it out." I wasn't even like asking him for advice. And he was like, and then he just started asking me questions. And he was like, "Well, why aren't you sure you should hire him?" And I was like, "Oh, this, and this." And he was like, "Okay, well, did you ask them this question on the interview?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." He was like, "Well, did you try?" And like he just went down this complete process, this blueprint of like, how do you figure out if this is the right person? Like, how can I actually diagnose my management problem right now? Like, is it the right hire? Was it a bad hire? And I just opened the floodgates to all of this HR wisdom that my dad had on like processes and hiring people. And I was just like, wow, like this is super, super interesting. And then I started asking my dad questions about his job every single day. And luckily, he had just retired. So I'm like picking his brain and I'm like, what do I do about this? This person wants a raise. This person's not motivated. This person's giving me attitude. I'm not sure if this person's a culture fit. And like all of these problems, one by one, I was able to go to him as like an encyclopedia of HR. And then I think another thing is just learning, trial by fire, like learning what not to do as a manager. I made so many mistakes and I just learned by making those mistakes. I think one of the best things you can do as a new manager is be radically honest with your team and say, look, guys, like there's a ton of potential here. I know how to do these certain areas of the business, but I'm new to management. I'm new to leadership. And this is a new company. But I believe that if we work together and we're all honest with each other and we respect each other, and you guys understand where I'm at and I understand where you're at, that we can work and grow this thing together. But like, hold on, let go of the insecurity of being new at this and just like admit it to your team and say, look, guys, I'm new to this. I'm new to this, but I'm open to your feedback just as much as I need you to be open to my feedback so we can work together and make this happen. And that takes a lot of the pressure of like, I need to be this leader for my team. It takes that off of you and
Mm.
it lets go of this like this fake identity that you almost have as a new leader, which is like, I need to be this great CEO for my team and I need to be this charismatic, motivational person for them. It's like, what if you were just yourself and very, very honest with them? And I think that's
Mm.
more powerful to people than pretending to be a leader that you're not, which is something I did in the beginning to admit.
When did you get to that realization? So, correct me if I'm wrong, but 6 agencies in, and every one
Seven
of them
now.
had 7 now. Every one of them
Yeah.
had like pros and cons, ups and downs. Like, can you walk me through that process? Because I know your story, but for other people, like it's pretty crazy how much what you've done in such a short period of time.
Walk them through the process of all of those agencies or which
Yeah, to a
part?
degree. To a degree, like as in like what you've learned going through that process, like how did that even come about?
Yeah. So I'll give the quick story. Um, for me, I started SMMA when I was 17 years old. I bought a course from a guy I watched on YouTube and I took the course. I started hustling 60 hours a week. I was super like awkward and had low self-esteem and didn't like talking to people, and I came to realize that this isn't all about running ads online. This is actually a game of talking to people. So I was like, damn,
Mm.
what am I going to do? I don't like talking to people. I don't like this. So I found a partner who was this like 32-year-old dude. He had a wife and kids. He's in the middle of Texas. And I'm like this 17-year-old acne filled fucking like just teenager just like, hey, you want to partner, want to be my business partner? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I'm like, all right, cool. Because he didn't know how to do ads, but he knew how to sell. He was a good salesperson. He was charismatic. And so we partnered up. We scaled that agency to about 20K a month. I was working, just doing all the back end stuff, taking home like 5K a month. Like, man, I'm making what my teachers make. This is sick. But eventually we got to a point of that partnership where I wanted to actually become a partner in the business. And he always said that was going to happen. But when push came to shove and I actually, pushed for that, we couldn't figure out how to make it work. And so I left that partnership. Actually, he fired me. And then I realized, like, damn, I just got fired. Like, I thought I was an entrepreneur. How did I just get fired? Like, what the heck? And that pushed me to start an agency again from scratch. And this time I said, I'm just going to do it myself and I'm going to figure out this whole sales thing and I'm not going to find a
Mm.
partner. And I came to realize, brother, that I was actually really good at sales, but I was being held back by my fear. And I was
Mm.
actually really good at talking to people and I was really good at listening to them more than anything. I was probably a better, to use an example that will fit your world even more, I was a better podcast host than I was a podcast guest because I was just good at
Mm.
asking questions. I was good at listening and I was able to use I guess my lack of wanting to talk to people, I use that as a strength rather than a weakness because I didn't want to pitch them. I didn't want to sell to them. So I just wanted them to talk the whole time. So I got really good at getting clients and prospects to build up their need for my service on these sales calls. And I would just ask and ask and ask. And I was genuinely curious on who they were. I think that was the biggest tip, like the biggest difference maker I had in my sales experience was I actually cared about the person I was talking to and I genuinely wanted to hear their story, where they were at. And it wasn't about, can I close this deal? It was about, like, can I help this person? And I know that sounds really fucking cliche of like, oh,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
dude, you didn't care about money at all. No, I wanted to make money. But I also really actually cared about these people because I didn't want to let them down. I was super insecure about letting them down. And so that kind of showed in my sales calls. And I really had a great connection with my niche. Like, as I reflect on it, I was talking to yoga studio owners and like bar studio owners. And so I was talking to a lot of like 40-year-old women and I was raised by a single mom. So I realized like I just knew how to speak their language because I'd been talking to my mom and her friends my whole life. Like I was really able to like connect with these like middle-aged women. And it was like a
Mm.
weird thing, but I don't think I would have done as well if I was talking to solar reps or like I don't know, different niches. But I really was able to connect with this niche. And so I just yeah, I learned how to sell myself. I started my second agency and then just kept rinsing and repeating until I stayed AI.
But man, at that point, you're so young that like you getting on these calls with people is like already hugely impressive. Like, forget about what you made, right? That's obviously fucking crazy. But the fact that you're able to walk through this process and get people on a call, you did this course for like $400 fucking, learned it and get these people who are owners, like business owners. They might have successful businesses, mediocre businesses, whatever. But that is like a huge achievement in itself. And then everything else that happens from there is amazing because like if you
Hmm.
consider the average like even like BDR or SDR in a company,
Yeah.
they can't even get calls, man, booked for an account executive. So you're doing
Hmm.
all this work that you don't even really appreciate at this stage because it's just to
Yeah.
you second nature.
Really interesting point, dude. If every like agency owner could think just like what you just said, if they could just be like me getting the call is the impressive accolade, not me getting paid, and they focused on
Mm.
just how do I get as many of these calls as possible, and like that became their reward, I think they would be far more successful than focusing on the outcome and the lagging indicator rather than the leading indicator, which is how do I just take these calls. So dude, that's beautifully said. Um, yeah, you're right. I
Well,
think that was the thing to be proud of more than anything. It's just doing it.
I think the metrics of success sometimes are often skewed. So like
Yeah.
there's the obvious like revenue metric or there's like the fucking Lambo or Rolex metric, right?
Yeah.
But there's all the other nuances which I think is very apparent when I speak to you. But I can see
Mm.
that like you're someone who can like move a conversation really well, who can engage with people, who actually gives a fuck about fulfillment, who actually gives a shit about it and
Dude,
works
that's
through that
literally one of our
process, you
core
know?
values. Sorry to interrupt you,
Mm.
but that's literally one of
You're
our core
fine.
values is actually give a fuck. Like that is like
Literally, man.
yeah, but on my Estate AI shirt, I should have worn it today, but on the back is our core values, and one of them just says actually give a fuck. So yeah, I just that's funny you said that.
Why do you think you have that desire to almost over deliver?
I think deep down it is a fear of not being enough no matter what I do, and so thus I always have to try to do more. I think I've
What's the
tried to cycle
cost?
it. What's that?
What's been the cost of that for you?
Oof, it's a really good question. Let's hop into a quick therapy session, man. I've tried to psychoanalyze myself a lot and figure out like why is this the case? Like, was it because my parents got divorced? Like, did I when I was young and I was raised by a single mom? Did I like blame myself for the divorce? Like, I've tried to figure out why is this the case for me, and I
Mhm.
haven't really been able to. I mean, I think there's plenty of reasons. Maybe there's not one big underlying reason, but the cost for me in business, it's been not being able to separate. It's been not being able to be satisfied. It's like no matter what, not being able to be like, oh, this is cool. Like I remember when I started in this game, I wanted to make $2,500 a month. That was my goal. 30,000 a year. I said out loud. I was saying this to a friend yesterday. I said out loud to the universe, to God, to whatever. I was just like, if I can make $2,500 per month online, I will be the happiest person in the world. I promise you. I said those exact words. And then I was making $2,500 a month 6 months later. I was like, damn, I got to get to 10K a month. Got to 10K a month. And I was like, man, I'm making six figures, but everybody does 10K a month. I got to get to like 20 because that'd be twice as cool. So I got to get to 20. And I was at 20. I was like, man, what if I could get to 100K a month? That's like nobody does that. That's crazy. Then I get to 100K a month. I remember seeing 100K a month on the Stripe that day. And I was just like, I think I like cried or something. And it wasn't like tears of joy. It was like, man, I worked this hard for this. Like really, it was all for this. Like I'm not fulfilled with this. I'm not satisfied with this. What am I doing? Like why do I keep chasing these arbitrary metrics? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs become aware of this, but yet they still do it. They still do it. They realize like they're just it's the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we do it every time. I did it at 10K, I did it at 100K, I'll do it at a million a month. I'll do it I'll do it the rest of my life. So for me it was the cost of this has not been being able to be satisfied. because it's never enough. No matter what, it's never enough. And so I think that begs the question, well, is that possibly because you are playing the game for the complete wrong reasons? Is
Hmm.
it possible that you're chasing the wrong metric altogether? So of course the metric's not enough ever.
How do you fill in the gap so that there is like a an element of like fulfillment? Is it stuff outside of the business, whether it's like
Mm,
relationships, like children? I don't know.
good question. Definitely not children. Not right now, at least.
100%.
How do you?
But
Glad we're on the line on that.
as you get older, let's say, like I would not even get older. I'm just mean like, what is that
Yeah,
pie? How do you fill that pie?
I'll share what it is for me. One of the things I heard when I was coming up in this game was your business is just a reflection of yourself. And that sounded like a little woo woo to me when I first heard it, but then it started to make more and more sense. And I think I've come to really realize how true that is. And so for me, the way I think about it is in order to grow a business, assuming this principle is true, you have to figure out how to grow yourself because it is just a reflection, right? So if you stay stagnant, your business can't grow. But if you grow, then your business has the capability of growing. And so for me, the game of entrepreneurship is just a channel for self transformation. And it's like it is a way for you to figure out how to become the greatest version of yourself possible. And I believe the meaning of life is to cultivate self-respect. The purpose of life is to help other people do the same thing. So for me, business is a channel to cultivate self-respect, figure out who I am, figure out what I'm capable of. I've changed. Like I am. I'm not even close to the same person I was just 2 years ago. Fuck, 4 years ago
3 months
when I
ago,
first
man.
started.
3 months ago, man. I
3 months
guarantee.
ago, probably two. Ever since I've been making content and doing podcast, I've been learning so much about myself every single day. That is why I play the game of business because I know one day I'll have enough money, I'll be good, I won't even need to think about those things. But I will be a person that has the ability to pass that on to other people and create the same amount of life changing results for the world. And like that is ultimately the goal is to serve others, change the world. But I can't do that if I can't even change myself. So
Mhm.
business is the way to change myself, thus that I can change the world in whatever way I feel like I need to, I feel called to.
Yeah, Alex Ramosi puts it as like the ultimate form of fulfillment is to help like a helpless entrepreneur without you getting the gratitude for it. If they didn't know that you helped them, would you still help them? And like
Mm,
that's the ultimate like source of like of fulfillment because you know that you're doing something that's good, you're helping people, and that's what ultimately where you want to get to. It's the first step of doing actual business because you know you can run someone's ads and you know you can smash it out. I
yeah.
want to get into different aspects on the skill side of things. So as you mentioned, you ran these ads for that first guy, and then it's been the skill you honed. How important has it been for you to like pick a skill and just go balls to the wall with it?
It's been the backbone of everything. I mean, there has been so many shiny objects that have popped up in this industry, and they're popping up right now with this AAA shit, bro. Like that, I don't, like AI
I'll watch a
automation
video on that.
is cool. And I love some of those guys. Like I'm friends with all the AAA content creators. They're cool guys, but like it's and it will be a business model that people make money with. I just think the people who are going and being attracted to that business model right now are massively confused. I think like they're it's a very confused audience. But AAA popped up. I remember paper deal, paper show, paper lead popped up, TikTok ads popped up, SaaS popped up. Like all of this shit just popped up, popped up, popped up. And I will say one because we're mentioning Hermosi in this. One thing that Hermosi has really just ingrained in my mind is most things don't matter, few things matter a lot. And strategy is not about what you say yes to, it's about what you say no to. And so, like, in the back of my mind, I learned Facebook and Instagram ads. I got pretty damn good at Facebook and Instagram ads. Like, above all, media buying is my favorite part of the business. And I figured out that one skill. Like I can run effective advertising on Facebook and Instagram for local businesses. So knowing I could do that, it made me just like I didn't want to jump into any of the other shiny objects. I didn't want to die the death of a thousand cuts by going and checking out this and checking out that and all. Like I just wanted to become the best in the game at this one thing, and I knew if I could just get better and better and better at this platform, eventually all my competitors would die of shiny object syndrome. They would die of not playing the game right, and they would cut themselves out, right? Like natural order. They would just cut themselves out. So that was kind of the thought process of mastering one skill. And I highly recommend it to any entrepreneur. You to do two things at once is to do neither. So just do one and get
100%.
really, really good at it.
100%, man. That's why my entire business is built around the podcast industry. Spent
Yeah.
3 years doing it, been going over and
Yeah.
over and over with it. And now basically I'm doing this podcasting for B2B podcasts, right? So the
Nice.
only reason why I did it is because I've done it myself. And people were like, how the fuck do you do it? Like
Yeah.
companies were like this. So that's how it started to develop. But
Mm.
my thought process on this is the fact that when people are going, jumping to thing to thing, right? Shiny object syndrome, whatever. But why do you want to be average at 8 things? This is what I don't understand. Is like, why would you want to do 4 to 8 different things and just be like 40%, 50% of them? Whereas, like, if you just did one, you don't need to do anything else. Something that you could
Yeah.
do later could be like a passion project, right? So, you could have a big agency and then you might want to build a SaaS business around it, e.g., Iman did something like that. But
Right.
at that point, and guest on my show called it escape velocity. So you go super, super deep and you blow up like a fucking whatever it is. And then when you're in into orbit, you can go off and do other stuff. But it's kind of like people get their first bit of taste of success and it's like,
Mm.
what's the next thing? But you just
Yeah.
found a vehicle, you just got product market fit or fucking service market fit. That's when you should be doubling down. So it feels strange. It even feels strange that someone would get up and want to do something else. But it's obviously just the marketing. The marketing behind ideas is so strong these days that it's pulling young
Yeah.
people in different directions.
It's it's a great point. It's definitely the marketing. It's also I think it's just deeply rooted in human nature. Um, I think it's deeply rooted in human nature that we get a false sense of security by investigating new things. It's like it's
Mm.
almost maybe this will be a weird analogy. I'm just thinking through it. It's coming to mind, but like it's almost like when we were a tribe thousands and thousands of years ago, and we heard a weird noise next to the camp. We had to go investigate it and check it out, and like we just had to do that constantly, constantly, constantly. And these new shiny objects are like the weird noises in the jungle that we aren't sure about, so we go check them out. And I think it is deeply rooted in our nature, but like that's why it is so easy to beat this game and win this game and beat these other people, is because most people won't even do the thing that's required to win the game because they'll jump ship to try to go find another ship in the first few months. Like if you just do the thing that you're doing right now, but do it 10 times longer than you are planning on doing it, you'll probably make a lot of money doing it. Like if you just ran Facebook ads and did nothing else but that for 4 years, you would eventually have such an incredible skill at Facebook ads. People in the industry would be coming to you, offering you money. You wouldn't even need to go sell them. They would just come to you and say exactly like what they're doing with you for podcasts. They'll just come to you and they'll say, how did you do this? How did you do this? Because you relentlessly pursued that one skill and you didn't get distracted by the weird noise in the woods. You just kept doing the thing you needed to do. So yeah, man, I hope somebody who is on the fence about jumping ship and changing business models, I hope that they can just continue doing that one thing. And the way I always try to think about it, because people want to blame the skill. They want to blame the
Mm.
model and say, you know what? Facebook ads are SMA saturated, podcasts are saturated, ecom doesn't work. They want to blame the skill. And so the thought process, the thought experiment that I always use when people, because I get that DM a lot, like, oh, I'm thinking about changing niches. I'm thinking about jumping into AAA. I'm thinking about doing this or that. I'm just like, well, why? Why do you want to do that? And they're like, oh, well, because this niche is broke or this niche is too saturated or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I always use Hermosi as an example. I'm just like, do you think Alex Hermosi would be able to succeed with what you're trying to do right now? Like, do you think he would win with it? They're like, yeah, he'd probably make millions. He'd probably get to like 1 million a month doing exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm like, right. So the problem isn't what you're doing right now. The problem is you.
Mm.
You just have to get better. You just have to get better. And the same goes for all stages of entrepreneurship where I'm at right now too. Like if I wanted to get a state AI to 1 million a month, I could blame the vehicle. And I've had this conversation with our leadership team of like, it's an SMMA, can't get to 1 million a month. That's way too hard. It's like, would Hermosi be able to? Fuck
Mm.
yeah. Fuck yeah. He'd get to like 3 million a month, 5 million a month. So that shows the problem is not what we're doing. The problem is who we are. And that's why the business is just a reflection of yourself. That's why I'm so big on it.
I always compare it to sports stars as well. Like when you see a sports star move from baseball to fucking hockey or American football to baseball, they're obviously going to be shit at it, even though they're at the top tier. So if they
Yeah.
can't even do it, then if you're meddling around in fucking C, D division, what makes you
Mm,
think you can move across, you know? Just put things
mm.
in very simple terms, which is like the opposite of how most people think about it. I want to ask you about one of the other pillars of a lot of your content is community side of things. So, of course, my podcast has always allowed me to open up into new networks of individuals, which I'm very grateful for because it's been 3 years to be able to like, have this kind of access. But how important has it been for you to even get into those spaces? Because you're a young guy coming on the scene, but you had access to these people pretty early on. It seems
Like mentors and masterminds and stuff.
that combination, but also people that are not necessarily like a million miles ahead, like a one rung, two rungs ahead in the ladder. Your network.
Yeah. So how did I grow it, or what impact has that had on me?
What combination?
Yeah. Honestly, dude, I've always been a terrible networker, like
Mm.
really bad, because I'm super introverted, and so like I don't want to go mingle at events. I don't want to. I want to sit at home and work on product and like have my few close friends and go like surf and like chill. I don't
Yeah.
want to be out there meeting. Dude, that tires me out. Like I don't, it's just I don't want to do that. So for me, I think getting out, that was another thing I had to push myself to do. And I just had to realize like I can optimize for comfort here in the short term, which is don't grow your network, learn less information, become less successful, or I can optimize for long term comfort. And I could say, let's get a little bit uncomfortable here. Let's get outside of our normal zone and let's acquire information, acquire relationships, and set ourselves up for long term comfort. It's like the idea easy decisions equal a hard life, hard decisions equal an easy life. It's like that philosophy. That's what networking was for me. And so I just met a lot of people through like Facebook groups, and I would make posts. I would provide value. If people had questions about fulfillment or Facebook ads, I would hop in. I would say, "Oh, try this, try this. What's your ad copy look like?" I would just provide value. And then people would start coming to me for that stuff. And so I made connections with people who were really good at the sales, but didn't know how to. That's how my first partnership happened. My partner was like, "Man, I just got my first free trial client, but I don't know how to run ads." And I was like, "Dude, let's hop on a Zoom. I'll help you out." Helped him out free of charge, showed him how to run the ads. And then eventually he was like, "Do you just want to do this for me? And like, I'll go sell clients." And I was like, "Sure." So that was kind of my networking philosophy. Till this day, though, the best advice that I've heard is if you want to attract the cats, you have to have the milk. And so I have made more networking connections strides ever in the last 5 months of making YouTube videos than I have in the last previous 4 years of going to events and like doing all this stuff and making like just building a brand. I've had people who make more money than me or have way more followers than me, but make less money. And so they're like, man, like you make more money. I have a bigger personal brand. Let's talk. Like I've just had so many connections come from making YouTube videos because I actually have something that people want, right? Like
Mm.
people are attracted to people that have social security, which is unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, a social following these days. So even though mine's very small in my niche, I've noticed a lot of people coming to me, reaching out, and that's been super interesting. So that's my biggest piece of networking advice. And then as far as the people I know, you're limited by what you know, and if you know people that know more than you, then you immediately increase your total potential intellectual capacity because you just have
Of
more
course.
people that know more things. So networking's been a big thing for me. I still am not as good at as I probably need to be.
You
But
don't
yeah,
need
that's
you don't need to be, man. That's the thing though. If you have your own content hub and your experience, that's it. You have your own
I agree
videos
with
you
that.
distribute, and then
Yeah,
that has the scalability factor. And like that's
yeah.
how I went super deep on your work. That's how many people, other people will. And YouTube is a gift at giving. I know you say you're introverted, but you speak incredibly well. You think
Thank you.
really clearly, which is like very unique to be able to think and speak clearly, and that attracts a certain actual type of caliber of individuals because now over time, as this will compound, it's infinite for you because
Right.
the biggest challenge with this stuff, and this is me 101, is you do all the content stuff without having done the business, and
Yeah.
then you kind of like you, you don't fuck yourself, but you make it way more difficult. So I was quite young, and I started my podcast, and I did it to learn. And at the time, I was going through um, a tech role. I wanted to get into like a COO, CEO role of like a big tech company. And over time, I changed my interests, and then I wanted to go build my own thing. So I was able to develop that, but as a result, I was never really like super specialized or super experienced. But then the way I work with people now is someone like yourself who smashed it. It's easy to build that content hub, and people
Right.
come to you, and you bring in that kind of tribe, you know. So that's my
Yeah.
recommendation for people who feel quiet, but you do it in a very nice way, so it comes across very clear, and
Mm.
it's very like appealing. So that's how people like, know, and trust you, right?
Well, thanks, dude. I think you're right. I don't necessarily need to network. I need to just get better at making content. Like Iman Ghazi doesn't have to network. He doesn't have to go mix and mingle. Like maybe he's trying to do that with like billionaires and stuff, but
Hmm.
ultimately, like because of his milk that he has, which is his personal brand, he has whatever cat he wants can come to him because he has
Hmm.
that. So you're right. If I just get better at content, I won't need to network. So that's a good reminder. But I appreciate you saying that.
I want to get your thought process and going from 0 to 1 for people who are just getting started. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
noise out there, a lot of confusion, a lot of fucking difficulty with people talking loads of shit on the internet. What's your recommendation for people in the agency space or when they're trying to build their products to go from 0 to 1 now at this stage?
Yeah. So I think of in this space, I think of 0 to 1 as like 0 to 10K a month. If you would agree with that. So my thought process of how do you go from 0 to 10K a month, like how do you actually just get that first step? Because that is the hardest step, is getting that first 10K, because you're really just realizing it's possible. Like you're training your brain to like completely eradicate a limiting belief, which is I can't make money online. And like in the back of everybody's mind, I feel like is that thing of like, can you really make money doing this? And so that first belief, eradicating that limiting belief, is the hardest part. And once you do it the first time, you're like, oh man, can I really? I'm at 10K a month, but can I really get to 100K a month? But then you just remind yourself, oh, I said the same thing about 10K a month, so of course I can. And then eventually it just becomes a staple in your mindset. So I think that's the hardest part, is really just like beating that belief. Tactically, how do you do it? I would focus on leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. So instead of how many clients do I sell, how much revenue am I making, forget about that. Like forget about 10K a month, forget about any of that shit, and just focus on how many contacts do I make per day? Like how
Mm.
many people do I reach out to every single day? And if you optimize for 200 contacts per day rather than 10K a month, and you just optimize for 200 contacts per day and you do that for 200 days straight, 200 days from now, you're going to be way past 10K a month. But it's when people get caught up in, oh, I need to be focused on 10K a month, not focused on 200 contacts per day. So I'll make 50 today, and then I'll do some client ads, and I'll work on my website tomorrow because that's going to help me with 10K a month. It's like, no, find the most important indicator for growth, and then just optimize for that every single day. And it's super simple. Like it is really, really simple. You just do 200 points of outreach every day: cold call, cold email, cold message, whatever you want to do. But most people won't do the simple, boring thing for a long enough period of time to see results from it. Just most people, it's just like the gym. Like 90% of people
Hmm.
who get gym memberships end up like not going to the gym anymore a year from now. So it's that same it's that same challenge just reflected in business. Focus on the boring leading indicator and do it consistently.
I want to get your thoughts on that outreach strategy, like how you go about doing that. Because just for context, so my like media company slash agency for podcasting has always been inbound generated. So I've had like a lot of
Okay.
people come in through the podcast. I do outreach myself. I do a lot of personalized like video outreach, and yeah,
Okay.
it works, right? It works. But I obviously don't do 200 because I'm doing a lot of personalized stuff. Do you do
Yeah.
shit like Lemlist? Do you do like mass outbound outreach? Like how do you think about this?
We do paid ads now, which is way easier, thankfully. If you can crack paid ads, that is a beautiful thing. My first 5 agencies were all cold email, LinkedIn automation, which LinkedIn apparently is kind of screwed because you can only do like 100 connections a week now. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they've kind of ruined that. But like Facebook DMs, IG DMs, cold email, and cold calling. And so if you can automate, you can use Limlist, you can use Mixmax, you can use Instantly, these cold emailing softwares. I like 4 sequence email campaigns, four step drip sequences rather than like one mass email to people. And I don't hyper personalize it, but I use custom values. So instead of like, hey Matt, and like it's super personalized. Hey Matt, I watched your YouTube video, this one video about this where you told this story. Like that's, I do think there's some truth to sales being a volume game, and so I want to focus on that. But I don't, in a market where there's just so many floodings of pitches in every person's inbox on every platform, you need to stand out a little bit. So I'm kind of trying to take a hybrid between quality and quantity by using custom values to where it might say, "Hey Matt, found you on YouTube," because all of that can be automated, right? But it's not saying, it's not getting hyper specific, and so I'm sending like minorly customized for email drip sequences to people. And then the second email is like, hey, just following up on my first email, did you get a chance to review it? And that is so simple, but most cold email replies come from the second, third, or fourth email. They don't come from the first email. So a lot of people will only send one email, they'll only send one Facebook message, they'll only send one shot, they'll only make one call. And that is why they don't get responses, is because they're not doing enough, not volume overall, but volume within the one person they're reaching out to. Like if I hit you up every day for the next 30 days, eventually I'm going to get a reply from you. So if you can
Mhm.
figure out a system that can automate that for you, you have a lot of success. That's why I'm a big fan of cold email. But I just highly recommend a 4 step sequence rather than like one mass email to a ton of people.
Were you handling a lot of the sales in the beginning?
For my second agency, yes. For my first
Mhm.
agency, no. For my third agency, no. For my fourth agency, yes. For my fifth agency, no. And for the sixth agency, no. And for the seventh one now, no.
How do you replace that? So do you have a like what's your system to build that out?
Business partner for State AI. So State AI, my business partner, CEO, he manages all the front end. And all of those were partners. All the times I wasn't doing it were partners. So
And
somebody
they
on
would
the
take the
focus on it.
calls. So
They
like
would take the calls.
and you
Yeah.
wouldn't be hiring like closers or fucking setters and shit. Like how do you think about that? Like what's your philosophy on that process? Because you're at this
Yeah.
crazy scale now, so you can look backwards through it, you know?
Yeah. In the beginning, if you don't have other forms of leverage, then you have to leverage your hours and your time, which like you have to just do the thing yourself. So in the beginning, the founder has to take sales calls. We didn't have to do that at State AI because we had leverage, which was money. So like we were just able to find people and pay people. But if I was starting from ground zero, yeah, I would take the calls myself. And then as soon as I can, I'm going to ramp up ad spend and I'm going to start building a sales team. I'm going to hire 2 closers at once, not one closer at a time. I'm going to bring on 2, and I'm going to just let whoever keeps himself. Whoever, like the thing about salespeople is if they are bad, they'll just quit because they won't be making money. So I'm like, I was talking to a guy yesterday. He's like, yeah, man, I've hired basically every person I've talked to. He's like, his hiring process is so weird. He's like, I've basically everybody I've talked to, I'm just like, all right, I'll give you a shot. If you aren't good, you're just gonna work your way out of the company. And so like he's brought on people that he wouldn't have otherwise brought on, but they ended up actually doing really well. And then the people he thought were going to do well, some of them didn't, and some of them just worked their way out of the company. Not recommending that hiring strategy, but it worked for him because he's just giving everybody a shot, and they're you know, if they're good, they're making the company money, they're making themselves money, they'll stay. If they're bad, they're working their way out. So bring on 2 closers at once. Make job postings on Indeed, make job postings on like Zip Recruiter, hire a recruiter if you can afford it, run ads on TikTok to get appointments with closers. That's a great way to get applicants right now. TikTok is
Mhm.
so cheap. It's a great advertising platform, especially for something like recruiting. So that's how I kind of think about building up a sales team.
I actually spoke to Alex Hayden yesterday about Closify.
Okay.
We recorded a podcast and like, he walked through that process too of like literally building out this entire sales like fucking empire basically. And that's how he
Hmm.
walked through it. Now the question I have on this, and I asked Ibrahim this too, is for someone like yourself who's building up a brand now, and it's inevitable that you will be at a large scale. It's just inevitable, right? Do you think that potential prospects will want to speak to you versus a 21-year-old fucking closer?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm sure they'll want to. If I applied for acquisition.com, I would want to talk to Hermosi. I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm probably not going to. So
But do you
I
think
mean,
that would jeopardize the?
eventually, like we applied for acquisition.com, right? So like our first three calls weren't with Alex; they were with their team, and then eventually we made it through, and we got to actually talk to Alex. So like, yeah,
No way.
so
What was that experience
yeah,
like?
that was that was cool, man. I was excited. That was at the time. I think that was one of my coolest entrepreneurial moments on this journey was hopping on a Zoom and seeing the fucking guy I've been watching content for 4 years that I've really looked up to being on that call and just asking us questions about our business, cracking a couple jokes. He was a cool guy, just a chill guy, and um, that was a cool process. But yeah, you know, I didn't expect to talk to him the first time. So if you make it through the interview process, you probably would talk to me the same way. If I make it through the interview process at acquisition.com, I'll probably talk to the people I actually want to talk to, right? The Hermosi.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's how I think about it. I think people should understand that. And if they don't, then they're probably not the right fit.
of course. And to be fair, that's gone back to your core principle, as in hire, recruit, fill in these gaps, and that's what's happening. Like you're already at that stage, you
Exactly.
know. So I want to ask about like that fulfillment side of it. So if you are scaling up, right? So when you went from 20 to 50 to 100 to 150K, how do you backfill that and make sure like what's your retention on customers? Like how are you increasing LTV of customers, or are you always focus on acquisition of new customers? Like how does that
Yeah,
work?
it's a good question. Well, those are really the only two levers you can pull. Like you can
Yeah.
pull acquisition or you can pull LTV. And so by having a partner who's pulling acquisition at all times, my job is to pull LTV at all times. And sometimes we have to
Mm.
come together and figure out how do we work together on this. Um, so we're doing both at the same time to keep the answer simple. Um, yeah.
And like in terms of that's actually it's just kind of blown my mind because like you got so big so quickly that it's just kind of crazy how you can retain these clients. So like what are you focused on in terms of like actually fulfillment? Are
Yeah.
you're making sure like you're always on top of it? Are you bring people through like a coaching program? Like you upselling them?
Yeah. Great question. Retaining real estate agents in a lead generation agency is very hard. The average retention in our industry is like 63 days. So it's like 2 months
Okay.
the average realtor will stay with a marketing agency. It's terrible. Ours is like 6 months. So we're doing three times the average, but still 6 months is not as long as you would want it to be. Um, so we're trying to figure out like how do we build an unbelievable level of retention, like an incredible level of retention where people are like, I don't even believe you're actually doing that.
Yeah.
Um, what we focus on to actually make that happen, a great onboarding process is super super important. Like first impressions are real, first impressions are very real. So we're trying to build a great onboarding process. As soon as they pay us money, we get a notification in Slack and our team member calls them up, our head coach calls them up, he welcomes them to the program, he says, hey, welcome, you know, super excited to have you, what made you want to join, what are your goals for the next 6 months. He just immediately resells them and reinvigorates them with excitement to just motivate them to make the most out of this program. Then we do an hour and a half long onboarding call where we're just hammering in expectations like you would not freaking believe. It's 160 slides of just like, here's what to expect, here's what to expect, here's what to expect, all while keeping them excited by showing them unbelievable case studies. And that's one of the things about Estate AI. If you go to estate-ai.com/testimonial-wall, it's like 10 freaking pages of just like 500 plus case studies and just like insane case studies. So we're using those testimonials to keep people excited while hammering in what it takes to become one of these case studies and really setting
Mm.
like incredibly thorough expectations, while also transferring ownership of the outcome to the client. And that is the biggest thing with the onboarding call. We're basically saying, look, all these clients have won and made money. If you don't win, it's because of you. It's not because of us, because look at all these clients. And when people take that ownership, they no longer can come to you and blame you and say, oh, this doesn't work. It's much harder for them to do that just from a social perspective. It's like what a cult is, right? If you are in a cult for a long enough period of time and everybody in the cult's like, oh, this is awesome, this works. Then one person's like, no, I don't think this works. It's like, oh, like, well, no, because this whole obviously this is a terrible example I shouldn't have used, but but you get the gist. It's like there's a psychological element to if people are just in a group of if you're a social creature and you're in a group of people and they're all doing well or enjoying something, and then you're the one person not enjoying it, you're not gonna, yeah, you're not just gonna um, go and critique that group because you're just going to believe that you're the problem. And so some of it is getting clients to realize that the results you get from an agency are just as much on you as it is the agency. That's something we
Mm-hmm.
really, really hammer in. Obviously, they can still come to us and say, I don't like these leads, or I didn't get a lot of leads. And if like we didn't get them good results, then we have to take ownership of that. But usually, if a client doesn't get results, it's because of them. It's not because of the agency. And so that's something we really try to dial in, hammer in.
It's the buy-in process, really, isn't it? And that's why like you have like a high ticket because they feel more emotionally invested, personally invested, and they're
Mm-hmm.
going to walk through that process. Because I think that's that towing the line between what you want to deliver or the outcome and the expectation is always a challenge because like I have some fucking podcast that we manage that does 500,000 views a month and generate a shitload of money for a coaching business or a learning platform. But then there's
Yeah.
some other businesses that have like a SaaS company and they just don't do as well. But then they do well in other regards. Like they get really good social proof or they get good authority in the industry. So like
Mm.
the outcomes can be different depending on a variable of factors. So that's why like instilling those expectations, that's obviously a careful balance for you guys. So like how you walk through that, because
It's a
of course
dance.
it's a dance, yeah. Because how do you get someone to be excited, but also not having to be like, this is a fucking trek?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That is the it's a very hard question. When you have enough social proof, you can go a little bit more thorough. You can go a little bit
Mhm.
harder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense, man. Makes sense. I want to ask about your own like lifestyle design now. So like you're building up, you're building your agency, you're doing many different things. Like how do you think about the future in terms of what you want to do?
I've really fluctuated on this, dude. There's been times where I'm like, man, like forget the agency, go move to Costa Rica and surf the rest of your days. Like like just completely go beach bum and like forget all of this entrepreneurship shit. But I don't know. I think there's something in me somewhere. I don't know if it's DNA or what it is, probably just the way I've grown up, that it's just like, no, you have to build businesses. Like I just can't imagine a life where I'm not working on building some project. So I really want to build a massive software company. That is my main goal. Um, as I was telling you before we started recording, that's the main thing that I'm trying to optimize for. So I'm guessing that I'm going to go into a period of 12 months of just like monk mode, like just no distractions, just a couple of close friends, working every single day, like no bullshit, just building, 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 go into a full like 12-month sprint. And then if I can build up a successful software company, if I can sell it for whatever, 8 figures, 9 figures, whatever we can do, then I think I start to really focus on purpose. I think I start to focus on bigger things that aren't as focused on what I want, but more focused on what do I think the world needs. As I was telling you again in the beginning, like that is my main ultimate play. So I think, but I don't think I have enough capital to do that. And that's the thing about money, is like it's a chase you always get stuck in. Like, oh, maybe it's a limiting belief. But I need more money. I need more money. I need more money to create this change or whatever. The way Chamath Palihapitiya shares it, who's one of my favorite just investors and honestly entrepreneurial influences, he says, have a vision for how you want the world to work, get the money to support the vision, and then don't sell out once you get the money. Have a vision, get the money, don't sell out. I have that written on my bathroom mirror. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm still in the get the money phase. Like $2 million isn't fucking anything, unfortunately. Like it won't, that won't actually influence the world. So I think I still have to a lot of growing. I have to go to the next level, and I think that's the next challenge for me. And then after that, it's yeah, focus on actually helping people, doing something bigger than that.
In what aspect would you want to help in?
I think I really want to help people with mental health because I struggled with it for so long. So I think that's like a big thing at the end of the day for me, is like really helping people who struggle with that because it's personal. I relate to it. But on a deeper level, so I did a podcast with a guy named Brett Malinowski. I don't know if you happen to know who that is.
No.
Um, But I did a podcast with him and I wore a shirt that said serveothers.com on it. It's a domain I bought. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I got a shirt that says serveothers.com. And he asked me like, what is this serve others thing? Like, what does that mean? It sounds cool. I was like, honestly, I have no idea what it means, but I know what the mission is. And the mission is to free the world. So when I look at the world, I see people who are misled mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and they have all of these problems and they don't know how to solve them. And they don't even realize their problems. Like a lot of unhealthy people don't even realize there's a better way to live, right? A lot of broke people don't even realize they are capable of becoming financially free. And so I think that is the long-term mission, is to free the world. How exactly that works, what exactly that looks like, I don't know. It's obviously an audacious goal. Um, but I think that's the long-term vision.
The challenge with that again is making people realize that their current situation needs to change. And that's
Yeah.
always the shift that happens either socioeconomically because people are come from a background of like poor family, poor family, poor family, or conditioning through traditional behaviors. So where I'm from in Ireland, it's very common to just do the same thing over and over and over and over. Don't put your head up. If you put your head up, it gets like fucking cut off
Yeah.
pretty much. So you need to have like different ways to break out, which is a way to fall into these negative cycles, whether it's drink, drugs, alcohol, um, food, diet, like
Yeah.
all these things which compound and then lead to like a miserable life. And I think the
Yeah.
only way that I was able to take my head out of the fucking sand was basically by being like away for so long because I see that yes, there's two different sides of life. There's the really, really like rich and famous people, whatever, which I don't exactly want to be. I don't really want to be rich and famous. But there's also the other side of it, which is like people who are super, super poor, but are also quite happy once they've met their needs of being healthy. So once that's
Yeah.
met and they've held over a roof over their head, like for instance, like I'm living in Bali, I've had people that lived with us that were locals previously, and they make like $30 a month,
But
right?
they're happy as fuck.
They had a seven. So tell you a story. That guy, how I met him was I was living in a complex and he was a cleaner in the complex, but we actually grew really close to him. So I was like, "Hey, don't sleep in the shed over there. Just sleep in my spare bedroom in my villa." So he was like, "Okay."
Hmm.
He didn't speak English, and then over time he
Wow.
was like, "Oh, you have to come meet our family." So his family was in, like the north of Bali. It was so far away. We went up there and there wasn't a house. It was just like a shed, and there was like 9 people in there. And then he actually left his job as a cleaner because he was like, I want to be closer to my family. Fuck this like work thing. So he's like 50 years old. He left that and now he's a pig farmer. So pigs only give birth, and they give birth like every like 3 months or 4 months. So he has like 30 pigs on the way every 3 months, and that's it. That's all he has. And he's like way happier. He wouldn't trade it off. We've offered him a role in our we've offered him to work in our new home. He doesn't want it because he's too far away from his family. So like, isn't that kind of quite interesting how you meet the
Yeah.
basic needs, food, shelter, whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
Then there's the other aspect that's more difficult to fulfill.
I mean, I am all for pig farming. Like, I'm all for that. What exactly that guy's doing. I think it's honestly inspiring. Like, can you
Mm.
feel more happy with less things? And I think there's something really beautiful within that. The idea of entropy to me is super interesting, and how clearly the world has fell victim to entropy, which is the second law of thermodynamics, which basically just states every unit you add onto a closed system, the more complex that system becomes. And the world is a great example of entropy, right? The world is a closed system. Obviously, we're trying to expand to more universes and planets and all of that, but currently it's a closed system. But every year since it started, we've added more and more units, more and more people, and it's just more and more complexity that is incurred. And so now around the world, we have these mics and we have these laptops and we have these fancy lights behind us and we have like all this shit, all this complexity, and it's just more and more and more. So I'm not necessarily inspired to help people figure out how to create more complexity in their lives. It's almost more about getting them to see that they can get more from less and helping them figure out how to be intoxicated with the idea of simplicity and just love. It's a lot of philosophical ideas. It's a lot of physiological ideas of just like how can you live better? How can you think better? How can you transform your mind? So I'm all for the pig farming. I'm all for, like, when I went to Costa Rica for the first time and I saw these people who just worked 2 hours a day and then surfed the rest of the day, and then they went and hung out with their friends and danced, and they did the same thing the next day, but they were so damn happy, so damn
Mm.
happy, more happy than any entrepreneur I've ever met. um, that to me was really, really inspiring. And so, bringing something like that to the world in some way, while also supporting the people who want to go and do great things.
Yeah.
Because if everybody was comfortable, then the people who are uncomfortable and want to control the world, basically the most ambitious person's going to win. If everybody else is just not ambitious and they're just chilling, they're comfortable, then the people who are outside of that, they're going to be the ones who end up controlling the world. And if those are good people, great. But if they're bad people, we're all fucked because we're all comfortable chilling with our pigs. So there's a dichotomy to be balanced there. That is, I think, a really interesting line that a lot of people start off on, but eventually fall victim to. It's the idea that the path to hell is paved with good intentions. I think that's very true. I think it's easy to say you want to change the world. I also think it's really easy to sell out. So I'm just trying to be aware of that on the journey. But yeah,
It's like having those desires, but knowing what the goal is, or not knowing what the goal is, but knowing what the goal may not be what you think it is, but having that adaptive mindset and then being able to actually channel that back into helping other people in some regard.
yeah,
Because that's ultimately where
exactly.
you want to go to. You know what I mean? That's why people donate 200 million or 100 million or or even like a million, whatever, is because they're at that point whereby it's like, oh, I've done this thing and now I can just simply give it off to someone else. So, man, I
Yeah,
want to finish on this point. I know you have to run, but I want to pick this up here and come back to it. We'll pick it up at this point, and we'll come
cool.
back to it, man, in a year and a half, whenever we meet in person. But man, I want to say
Heck yeah.
a massive thank you. There's so much more to go through. Like literally, I have like a shitload of more stuff to go through. But we
Yeah.
all in good time, man.
Cool. Cool. Well, dude, I appreciate you having me. Excited for our paths to cross again. And yeah, yeah, this was a fun chat. So I know there's a whole lot more we can definitely dive into. So I'm ready for it whenever.